Hello, adventurers. I am the Welsh DM, the one Welshman whose accent is lost in a dragon's hoard somewhere and we're not entirely sure where. We are back with another video in the Reimagined Classes series, this time with the Fighter. This class, along with the 3 other Reimagined classes, is being used in our actual play series on this channel, and it is designed to be a rewrite of the classic class from 2014 and throughout history of Dungeons & Dragons. It is an effort to give the fighter a real identity other than just making a lot of attacks that we've seen so far in 5th edition. So, with the new rule set coming in literally just a matter of weeks, now is a good time to dig into the class, what I view its core fantasy is, the mechanics that try to achieve that, and why the reimagined version might be more up your alley than the 2014 or perhaps even 2024 versions of the class. So let's get on with it. Before we start digging into the mechanics or anything, it's important with any class design, even a redesign, that we establish what our core fantasy is. You can write all the cool mechanics in the world, but if they don't harken back to a central archetype, the players are going to end up feeling disappointed and feeling like the character they were envisioning wasn't quite realized. When it comes to a fighter, I think there's 3 elements we should keep in mind throughout the class. The first of which is how they are viewed as a martial class. When we take into account the spectrum of martials, we need to view each one as having their own specific way in which they represent the martial archetype. Barbarians are about brute force and overcoming adversity through aggression and ignoring the odds. Meanwhile, on the other hand, you have rogues who overcome that adversity with guile, intelligence, and a little bit of underhanded tactics. Where the fighter comes in is showcasing someone who has spent a long time learning how to fight. Now, you might say that all adventurers do this, but when it comes to a fighter, it's about repeated techniques and practice and training with weapons and armor and in the heat of combat that they showcase their talents as adventurers. They have honed the practices, the skills necessary in the swirling melee of combat that they don't even have to think about them. It's instinctive and reactionary, and they just keep fighting. The second piece of the fighter's core fantasy is they are tough as nails and never give up. While a barbarian may endure a lot of damage through rage and just ignoring the blows raining upon them, fighters are the kind of characters that get up even after taking a huge amount of damage. They are the John Wick and Dean Winchesters of the world that just get absolutely beaten down, but then just spit and get themselves back up to one knee. And lastly, the thing to keep in mind is it's really hard to pin down the fighter archetype because there are so many. There are so many versions of fighters across media, books, TV, and movies that defining them by a singular class can be hard. So to that end, we want this class to be versatile. We want players to have options to hone in on their character's ideal and way of fighting, where they are distinct from other fighters around them, while also sharing similar core traits like their practice with weapons and their ability to overcome huge damaging blows. With our core fantasy and central archetype established, it's worth now looking back to the class as it was designed in 2014 to identify the things that we think work and the things that don't work and perhaps we want to change or just get rid of. It's worth reiterating at this point, this class was designed in comparison to the 2014 version of the fighter, and as such, when 5.5e rolls out, as we are seeing, these comments might not apply anymore, especially with the release of the new weapon mastery concept. That being said, I still don't think the 2024 fighter is achieving the core fantasy that we just established, so we can still make commentary about it. So what is the primary problem with the 2014 fighter? It's bland. It doesn't do anything outside of the central game loop of run up to a monster, roll an attack roll, and if you hit, roll some damage. Beyond that, the fighter doesn't do anything within the core class that lets it feel different, that lets it feel unique when compared to the other 11 classes available in the player's handbook. This means that playing a fighter within the system gets repetitive very quickly, because you don't have the options to explore outside of a central game mechanic that functionally everyone else is using too. So it's very hard for your character to feel like they're unique or serve a particular purpose within the party, because functionally everyone else can kind of do what you do anyway. To that end, where the fighter actually tries to establish itself is via subclasses. Personally, I don't think that's good game design. I think a class should be able to have an identity in and of itself, and what a subclass does, especially within 5th edition, is evolve that identity in a particular direction, going from a generalist to a specialist. And lastly, and this is a complaint I have with pretty much all of the 2014 classes, it doesn't progress in an interesting way. The fighter's later level class features, especially anything after 10th level, are just extra attacks or ASIs. That means that the class never feels different at 6th level as it does to 16th level. There isn't a meaningful, appreciable enhancement of skills or new tactical combat or even non-combat options for the class to explore as they level up. It's no surprise that multi-classing is so common in 5th edition, because pretty much all the classes beyond really 10th, maybe 11th level, don't offer anything new and exciting to draw players in to level that up. Rather, they could go to another class and get brand new shiny features. Of course, it's not all bad. The extra attacks that the fighter gets is somewhat of an identity. I just don't think you want it to be the core identity. And so too, Action Surge is pretty damn cool and does kind of represent that determination and ability to keep going that we mentioned in the core fantasy. So having looked back, let's look forward. What does the Fighter Reimagined do differently? What are the class features? And just why should you be playing this class over the 2014 version, or even the 2024 one? I'm not going to bury the lead here. We're going to skip to 2nd level and bring through the feature that quite a lot of people wanted for the 2024 fighter: battle maneuvers. Now, we can acknowledge WotC's stance that maneuvers complicate a class they want to be an introductory class, but at the end of the day, I don't think there should be such thing as an introductory class. All the classes should feel like they can be picked up by new players and also mastered by experienced players. So let's ignore that premise, and we are bringing battle maneuvers into the fighter where they belong. At 2nd level, you learn 2 battle maneuvers and you gain 2 martial die. Those die are d8s. You intentionally start relatively limited at this, and it does grow quite rapidly as you progress, ending at 20th level with 11 maneuvers known and 8 martial die, all of which come back on a short rest. So you are going to be churning out these complex combat maneuvers all of the time. This class feature speaks to our central pillar to its core. It represents the absolute technical mastery as a fighter you have with weapons and in combat situations, or in some cases outside of combat, depending on your maneuvers, compared to the barbarian's just all-out aggression. You are thinking, you are using technical skill to overcome your foes, not just your pure strength of arm. And as it progresses, we see that your stamina increases as well, showcasing your ability to endure harder, longer fights with more maneuver die to let you do things as the game progresses. But battle maneuvers aren't the only defining feature of this class that you gain very early on. I've spoken about the durability, the ability to push on despite the odds that the fighter has at its core. So we need a mechanic that represents that. I'll preface this saying I like Second Wind as a feature. I think it provides a meaningful hit point return when a fighter might need it. However, I don't think it represents the imagery in my head of a fighter getting up after being smashed down by a huge blow from the villain. So instead, the fighter now gets Grim Determination. As a bonus action, much like Second Wind, you can regain a number of hit points equal to half the amount you took since your last turn. This really represents you getting absolutely pummeled by a big giant or surrounded by foes, taking that damage, and then at the end of it, just looking around you and just taking a breath in, spitting the blood out, and readying your sword to take down your foes once again. Grim Determination allows you to be that fighter that just can take punishment and cannot be put down. They will keep on coming until you absolutely bury them. You gain Grim Determination at 1st level, and at 2nd level you gain a feature called Fast Recovery. This represents your fighter's ability to stitch up their wounds in a blink of an eye and just get on with the adventuring day once more. When you take a short rest and roll hit die to recover hit points, anytime you roll a 1 or a 2, you can re-roll that die. It's as simple as that. It represents your fighter being an absolute tough as nails combatant that can take an absolute punishment, go, I'm fine, and then get on and start fighting again. While your allies are scrabbling for healing, you are the one that's ready to shrug your shoulders and get on. This is really representing that the fighter is a short rest class. They get a lot of their features back on short rests, and when they take short rests, they are ready to go faster and better than other classes. The other defining feature you get is fighting style. This hasn't gone anywhere. However, we will see later that just because it's the same doesn't mean it's not going to get better. So those are our core features for the fighter established early in those first two levels. We can see that they are incredibly tough, able to keep going, and fight with an intelligence, fight with a skill that other classes don't have. And then at third level, with that core fantasy established, they are then able to specialize into their form of fighting, whether that is the samurai path, or the arcane knight path, or the psionic knight path. We have a central core to a fighter that very quickly then allows them to specialize into the style or esoteric methods of fighting that they want. Moving on to other levels. At 5th level, extra attack is back. It does cap to 3 attacks after 11th level, but you'll understand why when you see the capstone. We still want fighters to be able to attack more. They're more comfortable in combat than most other classes, but we don't want it to become their core identity alone. And at 6th level, Action Surge has also remained. I love it. I don't think it should go anywhere. I think it does meet that core fantasy we've talked about. But that's not all you get as you enter into that tier 2 of play. At 5th level, you gain Iron Resolve. Indomitable was flawed. It was a good concept allowing you to re-roll a saving throw that you failed. The problem was, as a fighter, when you failed a saving throw, it was probably a wisdom save. And let's be honest, when you re-roll it, you're probably still going to fail, which means you're re-rolling a feature, it's not succeeding, so why bother having the feature? Iron Will is more reliable. Instead of just re-rolling the d20, instead you can choose to roll a hit die and add that result to your saving throw. You can only do this a certain number of times, but it represents you using your stamina and ability to push through on an entire day to survive the dangerous effect happening right now. But beautifully, this also blends with your fast recovery feature because you need less hit die when you're taking short rests. Because that floor has been raised on the rolls of your hit die to recover hit points, you can stand to use some to succeed on saving throws during the fight. And the last thing you get in this area, you also get at 6th level, which is your combat superiority, which just represents your comfort on the battlefield and the fact that you know how combat works better than other people. Anytime you make an attack of opportunity, your attack is at advantage. Basically, no one is escaping your blade unless you want them to, and you get to show off with your technical skill. We've seen the core ideal, we've seen where the fighter evolves into a competent, comfortable, experienced adventurer. Now we're into the higher levels where the fighter enhances their craft, improves their prowess, and is ready to take on the really dangerous foes of this world. As with a lot of the classes I design, these features really do harken back to those core features that we've already got and seek to improve them, not just to make them feel stronger, but to broaden their capabilities such that when you do use them at later levels, it feels fresh and new. At 9th level, you get improved fighting style. You chose fighting style at 1st level. You've spent 8 levels being amazing at that ability. You have become a master at your craft, and not really many are equal to your skill in your particular area of fighting. For example, you may have chosen the defense fighting style at 1st level. Now, when you are using the attack action, you can choose to forego some of your additional attacks to increase your armor class by the number of attacks you've decided not to use, representing you just hunkering down behind your shield as you prepare for the enemy's attacks. Alternatively, you may have taken the duelist fighting style. Now your skill at honing in and picking on a singular target is exemplary. Every time you make an attack roll against the same creature, you gain a +1 bonus to hit. So your second attack against the same creature gets a +1 to hit. Your third attack against that same creature gains a +2 to hit. If you then action surge, it keeps increasing and then resets at the start of your next turn. This is representing that you have really honed the one-on-one nature of dueling, such that one target becomes your quarry and you will not let them escape you. At 13th level, you gain a feature called Force and Opening. How many times have you watched a TV show or a film where a knight is just hammering away at their opponent until their opponent can no longer defend against the onslaught of blows and drop their guard and are just slammed through with a deadly attack? I've seen it quite a lot, and I'm gutted I can't do it in D&D. With force an opening, when you hit with an attack, you can instead choose to try and force an opening. Instead of dealing damage the normal way, the creature only takes damage equal to the attack modifier damage, usually your strength or dexterity modifier unless you have a magical weapon. But then their armor class is reduced by 1 until the start of your next turn, giving you a greater chance of hitting with subsequent attacks, but also giving your allies a greater chance of hitting with their attacks because this creature is so busy fighting for their life against you, they can't possibly defend themselves against anyone else. Personally, this is my favorite feature in the Fighter Reimagined. I think it's really evocative of what a fighter can do with their weapons, utterly raining blows down upon a foe until they are left undefended against your final strike. I want my classes to be cinematic. I want them to be dramatic, and this lets me do that. And then at 17th level, we get improved combat superiority, harkening back to the combat superiority feature we got at 6th level, enhancing it, improving it, and adding to it. So you already make attacks of opportunity at advantage because you understand the flow of combat. Now attacks of opportunity against you are at disadvantage. Your footwork is just too good, too smooth in the swirling melee that you can see attacks coming and just nimbly slide out the way of them while you continue on your path through the enemy ranks. Not only that, but when you reduce a creature to 0 hit points, your movement speed is increased by 10 feet, allowing you to keep moving through enemies as you cut down the chaff on your way through to the final boss. Now you really are Aragorn, culling your way through hordes and ranks of orcs to get to their general and end the fight before it can start. Lastly, the capstone feature. I love capstone features. I think they should be incredibly powerful and verging on, if not actually, broken. They represent an incredible commitment on the player's part to dedicating themselves to a singular class and not gaining the benefits of other classes. And in world, it represents that character is the paragon of this archetype within the world. There are very few, if any, level 20 characters in a world of Dungeons & Dragons, and so your character being a level 20 fighter showcases that they are the best fighter in the world, bar none. As such, their capstone should represent that, and in 2014, getting a 4th attack does not do that. In my head, a fighter is always seeking that finishing blow, that strike that will end the combat and claim victory. Your capstone feature in the Fighter Reimagined is what that is focused upon. Master of Warfare is focused on increasing your chances of getting a critical hit. Each time you hit a creature without getting a critical hit, your critical threat range expands. So the first time you hit a creature and it's not a critical, your critical threat range on the next attack becomes a 19 or 20. The second time, it's an 18 or 20. It can reach a point that a 15 or higher will be a critical hit. This takes the concept of a fighter being a technical master, always seeking that opening, that final blow, with their nature of making a lot of attacks that we've kept from 2014. Now, as you keep attacking, that chance of you finding that blow that will decapitate the enemy, plunge into their heart, or just sweep the leg from under them, now increases. Combine this with a champion fighter, and quite frankly, it's terrifying. But it's a capstone ability. That's what it should be. It should represent your fighter being better than anyone else in the world and capable of taking down dragons and demigods. But it shouldn't just be about offensive capabilities. This feature should represent the fighter as a whole and the pinnacle it can reach. So we also want something that harkens back to the durability of the class. To that end, once per short rest, when you are hit by a critical attack, you can decide to normal hit instead. Thematically, it's probably still a devastating blow, but it's just representing your fighter taking that sword to the gut, pulling it in closer, and then just stabbing back as they just do not let their foe have the satisfaction of landing a deadly blow. And that's the core class of the Fighter Reimagined. I hope you can see that it now has an actual core identity that allows it to stand shoulder to shoulder with the other classes in the PHB, rather than just being an introduction class that plays with the base mechanics of the game. This fighter is a tough-as-nails expert soldier that can just keep fighting and keep finding ways to bring down their enemies. It's able to endure an absolute punishment of damage, but in an entirely different way than the barbarian does, allowing the two to fill a similar niche as a tank, but achieve it in very different ways and feel distinct because of it. And at the same time allows them to show their expertise with weapons and armor through years of training, showcasing a comfort on the battlefield focused on technical skill, not just making more attacks. Obviously, this version of the class lives and dies on the maneuvers ability. We spoke at the start of this video about one of the core pieces of the fantasy of a fighter is the fact that there are so many versions of the fighter out there, and we need this class to be diverse in the kind of characters it can tell. Battle Maneuvers gives us that. With a broad range of options, players will never feel like they're playing the same fighter twice, because they'll always have a different maneuver that this character has learned to enhance their ability both in combat and out of combat, with a number of features pertaining to roleplay or exploration. I think it's really interesting to have a fighter that has these little adjustments to the core game loop. So while they're still going through that move, attack, and damage loop that everyone else is going through, they have this ability to just tweak it in a direction that they want because they understand the system. On a meta level, these fighters know how combat works so well that they can add to it in their own interesting and diverse ways. Now, it wouldn't be a class breakdown without discussion on subclasses. Firstly, as with every reimagined class, the goal is to build a class that still works with every officially released subclass in the game, and the Fighter Reimagined roughly does that. The only one it perhaps doesn't work seamlessly with is the Purple Dragon Knight, but to be honest, who was playing the Purple Dragon Knight anyway? But just in case you do want to, if you get the PDF, there is a small section explaining what to adjust in the Purple Dragon Knight to make it work with the Fighter Reimagined. And obviously the Battle Master fighter can't be used because we've already got battle maneuvers, and that would be kind of pointless just to have a subclass that gave you more battle maneuvers when you already get quite a lot of them. So also available in the PDF is a brand new subclass, the Warlord subclass. This is a subclass designed around the concept of the class of the same name from 4th edition. And basically it allows you to be a bit more of a support class, and also sort of fills the hole left by Battlemaster no longer being available. Its primary element is being able to command your allies with a bonus action to either increase their AC, increase their chances to hit, or get them to move around the battlefield, allowing you to feel like a battlefield commander to some extent. At later levels, the Warlord can encourage their allies by leading from the front, either by granting temporary hit points or giving them bonuses to their saving throws to keep them in the fight. And the Warlord's final feature is a real grab victory from the jaws of defeat feature. It allows a number of allies to roll hit die in the middle of a fight, getting them back up, getting the fight going again. When all was lost, you issue a rallying cry and everyone finds that inner reserve to keep pushing and find victory in a really dramatic and theatrical way. If you do want to play the Warlord, you can grab it along with the entire class. There'll be a link in the description to the DM's Guild entry of the class. It's really cheap. You can also grab all of the reimagined classes as a bundle where you get a little bit of a discount. So I probably recommend doing that. Straight up, I love the fighter as an archetype. I think it's really cool. I think it exists in this space of the human as a species, where it's, yeah, sure, there's magic going around, there's raging barbarians fueled by primal power, and there's sneaky rogues stabbing people in the heart. And I'm just a dude with a sword, and I'm still here, still badass, and still able to make a difference and save the world. It's an archetype I think's been consistently let down by Wizards of the Coast through 5th edition, with them clinging to this concept that it's the introductory class to allow people to learn the game. I don't think you learn the game by playing a boring class. I think you get bored playing a boring class. Ultimately, that way of thinking left the class feeling bland, vanilla, and uninspiring, rather than the heroic ideal that the fighter could and should be. I've sought to give this class its own identity. All I can say is I hope I've done that, and I hope that you agree with me. If you do, or if you disagree, please leave a comment below. I'm happy to discuss further about the class and what you think the fighter could or should look like in a revamped, let's say, 6th edition. And also let me know what kind of fighter you want to build with the Fighter Reimagined. Leslie in Unrolled Stories is a completely wild version of a fighter I've never seen, so I'm really excited to see what other people think the Fighter Reimagined can be. And as always, if you've enjoyed this video, do please give it a like, and if you want to see more of this, please do hit subscribe and hit the bell icon to make sure you're notified when another video from me goes up. With that, I don't really have anything else to say, so until I come back, keep an eye out for flying dragons, and I will see you next time. With that, I don't really have anything else to say, so until I come back, keep an eye out for dragons, and I will see you next time.